Okay, hi everyone. Today I'm just going to be covering how you can go about creating this sword type mesh. Pretty much it's going to be using the exact same type of effect that I did with my mesh VFX. So if you're not too familiar with that, there is two other videos I've covered, one making a tornado, one making a dome shape effect. It's a similar concept, but today we're going to be covering the creation of this. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly show you what it will look like. It won't include any of the additional effects that you see here, but it's going to include basically the sword appearing from nothing. So if I just press this key here, so yeah, it's a little laggy, but it should play the animation for all of them like this. You see how it sort of comes into existence? Now the way this is set up is it's set up using the same technique, so it's just basically scrubbing through some textures. So it's basically going from the first image here all the way to the end, and effectively the way it's been set up is, if I go into Blender real quick and I'll show you, this is how it's been set up. So the mesh here is set up using this node network, which we will create in a separate place, in a separate file, sorry, but it's being controlled by this value. So when you scrub through, you can see that essentially what we're doing here is we're basically using a mask to make the model go from invisible to visible, and we're using a sort of noise in between to sort of do that. So yeah, we'll be trying to cover this today. Just bear with me for 1 second, and yep. So basically what you want to do here is you want to grab whatever mesh you're going to try this on. I've just got this sword model. I just grabbed it from a free open source on a different Discord. But yeah, it's nothing too special. I can provide this exact model. I'll be giving out the exact blend file, this one here, for people to use after the video is completed. But if you want to try and follow along with this, then I'm going to be covering it from the start. So if you import the model that you want to use into Blender, so if you just go to File, Import, you can import an FBX, you can import a mesh or a model. If you head over to the Shading tab, you might see a separate window here, so you just click on this option here and set this to Timeline. That'll give you this timeline that you can work with. And if your window here doesn't look exactly like mine, you can click on this little drop down here and change the world opacity. And yeah, it may look like this. So yeah, you might see the background. You can keep that if you want, but I just like to keep that hidden. So this normally comes in with a principled BSDF. This is the basically the material for this sword, and yeah, it's just something that we'll need to sort of, play around with, sort of try and get it to where we want it. So what I like to do is I'll just change the base color. I mean, you can obviously use your own texture for this, your own base color, metallic and roughness, if you're using like customized like textures from maybe like Substance Painter or something like that. But this is just a basic base color with some metallicness on this sword. I didn't do anything crazy. If you do a custom texture, that's basically what you would have to do for that there. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of highlight that. So we don't actually need the normal map, so we can get rid of that. And I'm just going to try and copy the same outcome from my previous, from my other blend file. So what we technically need to start with is, if we hit the tab key, we can search for a texture coordinate node, and what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to access the UVs of this mesh. Now that's something that I've not actually tried out with other meshes. You may have to do some UV editing to get this to work properly. For this sword model, it works perfectly fine. So the first thing you want to do is you want to, well, actually, what we're going to do is instead of using the UVs, we're going to use the generated field. And the reason we're doing that, it's basically just to override the UV issue. So what I was just mentioning there was, is if the UV shell itself is maybe messed up in your model, or it's not set up properly, you can get away with using the generated node instead. It may give you different results than what you're looking for, but I'll try to cover it as best I can. So if you drag out from the generated node, type in mapping, that'll give us a vector to work with. And once we've got this vector, this mapping node, this will just allow us to control the x, y, and z value. And we're going to basically connect a Voronoi texture to it, so that's basically just a noise node. So that's basically what we have here. And if we plug this into, well, basically what we're trying to achieve with this is we're going to be controlling the alpha, so this value here. And by doing that, we can actually set it up so that it's got some sort of transparency. So if you click on this option here where it says material, scroll down, if you set this to alpha clipped and set this to none on the shadow mode, if you play with the alpha, it should disappear. So you see how the whole mesh disappears. This is the sort of idea that we're going for. So we're going to create a shader using these nodes to control the alpha, and we're going to do that over time so that we can make the mesh appear from top down or left to right or however you see fit. You can obviously edit this to suit your actual effect, essentially. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug this into the alpha just to see what we're getting at the moment. So as you can see, you do get a similar effect to my other videos where it's cutting away, and this is sort of what we want to try and get to, but in order to do this correctly, we're going to have to sort of modify this so that we're using both a noise texture as well as a sort of like a gradient texture, if that makes sense, because we need to sort of mask this away. So if we click and drag out of the generated, we're just going to use the same one again. We're going to basically do a second mapping node, and we're going to drag out from this and we're going to do a gradient node. It's a gradient texture. And this gradient texture is going to behave like the mask. So we're just going to hide some of this really awful noise. So if you right click, you can actually do this, which is called cut links. You can actually cut one of the links that you've connected to before. It's just a handy thing to know. So we're going to have to mix these two together. So to do that, drag out from the color node and type in mix. You should get a mix color, which is what we want. And we want to plug in the distance into the B section here. And we want to basically set this to, I believe it was soft light that I did in my first, in my other blend file. So we'll do that. We'll just copy that. And what we're going to need to do here is now that we've mixed these two together, I just place this into the alpha. Quick, you can sort of see what we're getting. So I'm actually masking off half of the sword, but we're still retaining a lot of the noise in between at the edge, which is how we're going to drive this. So I'm going to just play with some of these settings real quick. So if we go to the mapping node, I believe what I did was I set the Y rotation to about 90 degrees. So if we do that, I think that just sort of evens up some of the noise here. And I believe I made the scale on the X value quite high, so we get some of this, so the jagged look. And in order for this to basically look like it should, we're going to affect the top node here, which is the gradient texture, because right now we're getting half of the sword, which is not what we want. We want to rotate it by 90 degrees. So if we do the Y value here, type in 90, you can sort of see what I'm getting now. So you can see the beginnings of what we had. So this is cutting away the mesh from top to bottom. Now, again, you can edit this to suit your mesh. So you can change these rotation values and the location values to suit your needs, to what you want. So yeah, just to let you know, that's how this is created essentially. So I'm just going to play with some of these other values just so that we can sort of get some of these spikes, because the spikes are a little big. So if you play with the scale value, which is part of the Voronoi texture itself, you can play with the actual number of spikes. And I think what I did was I set it to a smaller value, like about 0.9, 0.1, just to give it sort of the stylized look here. And we can up the detail just a little bit, and we can mess with some of the roughness. So I think I did something like about 0.7 or so roughness or something like that, just so we've got something like this with the spikes on it. And yeah, I mean, you guys can mess with these values and get the results that you're looking for. You can also change out this Voronoi texture for something else. You don't actually have to use this exact one. It's really just play with the numbers sort of feel. The factor here is what basically controls the blending between the gradient texture, which is our mask, and the actual noise texture here. So if you play with the factor value, you can see that we're going from like a really smooth cutoff to a really spiky cutoff. So it really just depends what you want to do. I think I also clamped the result here as well, which just changes the way it behaves when you're scrubbing through. So I think I set the factor to about, I think it was about 0.1 or something like that. Something like that, just so you've got the stretchiness here. And then what we want to do is we want to actually use a node that is called a mapping node. So this is not something I've covered before, but the mapping node is how this is basically going to drive a lot of this stuff. So we're going to cut this link here, and we're just going to plug this directly into the alpha. So if we do that again, we should get this again. But effectively what we're going to be doing here with this mapping node is we're going to switch this to from a point to a vector. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us basically, oh sorry, not a mapping vector, we need a map range vector. Sorry, that's my mistake. So yeah, we need a map range. That makes more sense. Yeah, so this is the node we need here. Just apologies, just ignore that part. So if we plug this into the alpha, we should still get the same effect, but this entire node is what controls the sweep going from top to bottom. So we just leave this unclamped, and basically we're just going to be controlling the 2min value. You can mess with the other values obviously, but if you drag some of these numbers, you can sort of see what we're getting. And this is what drives the actual effect. This is the meat of the effect, if you will. So this is what's going to create the illusion of it sort of appearing from thin air. And all I did for my own sake, just so I wasn't editing all three of these values, is I just click and drag out of here, and you can create a value, which is basically just one singular number value to control the whole thing here. So this controls the x, y, and basically all three of the numbers here, or the x, y, and z value, all at once. So if I drag this, you can see that we start off here, we can go all the way to the end. So yeah, the next thing to do, just because it doesn't look all that good at the moment, is I'm just going to cut this link real quick, just by right clicking and clicking on cut link. We're just going to add in a color ramp. We add in a quick color ramp. This is going to give us a gradient to work with, and we're just going to use this to basically drive the emission. So this is not something I've covered just yet, but in the principled BSDF, this is because this is an actual material. So if you have a PBR texture or something like that, make sure that your base color, metallic, and roughness and normal maps are all set up here. But we're going to be playing with the emission using this color ramp. So if you just drag the color ramp down a little, we're basically going to be using this as a way to drive the strength of the emission. Because right now when we're scrubbing through the actual effect, which you can't see at the moment, but when you're scrubbing through, there isn't that nice glow that I had on the other file. So this is how I basically went about it. So we're going to click and drag out of the color. Then I add in a multiply node, so just a math multiply, and that's just going to control the actual, the amount of strength that we're going to have in this emission channel here. So if you open up this emission, you should see a color and a strength value. We're just going to control this strength value via this. So you won't see anything at the moment, so I'm just going to drag this down. We're not going to change anything real quick right now, sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out from the map range again, and this is a trick that I have covered in my other two guides, but when we bake out the textures for use in Roblox, sometimes we do lose some details. So the fix for that is just to use a greater than node, So anything that's greater than 0.5 will basically keep the detail contained within the image. So if you're finding that when you're baking out the texture that there is some issues here, then that's why. So you need to add a greater than value, and for this particular one I think I clamped it, so you need to clamp that value, and then we need to plug this directly into the alpha. So we should get the cut back, we should get the spikes back, nothing should have changed, but what we're going to do here is we're just going to play with the colour ramp as well as the strength, and just so that we can see it properly, we may need to enable the bloom effect, so we'll just do that just now. So if you click on the render option, there should be an EVA render engine setting. If you tick on bloom, that's going to enable bloom and emission to work. And effectively what we're going to do here is we're just going to basically ramp up this value. So we're not actually changing the colour just yet of this. You can do that inside of a colour ramp if you wish. I'll just set it to some sort of white for the moment. And if we play with the values here, maybe up the strength a little, yeah, you can see that that's getting quite a lot. Let me just see here, because I believe this color ramp should control. You see how there's sort of this difference here. This color ramp is controlling the actual glow itself, so we want to flip this. So to do that, you want to click on this little arrow key here and flip the color ramp. And you won't see anything at the moment, but if you drag this up, you see how we get this nice separation. And that's sort of how I went about creating the actual glow effect. Now I coloured mine blue inside of here, so you can actually change the colour here. I think I did something like this. But when you export it to Roblox, you can export it with a colour if you wish, but you can also leave it just as white, and that will also allow you to change that inside of the decal texture. Depending on the value you give it here, you can make it stronger or weaker. You can also change the intensity here as well, or the threshold of this, and you can also change the amount of glow that you wish to give it. So you can give it like a really sort of close edge glow here, or you can make it like really wild and have it as far up as that if you want. I just sort of did something like that. That was enough for my effect really. And yeah, you just need to play with these values a little bit. And when it comes to actually exporting this sword, the same outcome is used in my other two videos, where you can bake out the textures. So I'll show you how you do that, but you can control it using the value here. So in the timeline, because we're using this value to control this, so this is what it will look like. So you can set this to a number like, I don't know, let's say like -15 or something, because you can just have it start here. That could be frame 1. We just right click, insert a keyframe. So if you click on the value option, you can see that there is a timeline here. So if I set the timeline to, we don't want it too crazy, let's just limit it to something like 16 frames. So if we had 16 frames of animation to work with, so let me just back. So yeah, I think I moved it accidentally. So if we start off with the keyframes at -15, move forward to 16 frames, and we simply just move this forwards until the full sword is visible, which I think is above the value of 1. So I think if you go above 1, or just on the number value 1, you should be fine. And if you right click again, insert a keyframe, you should see now that we have full animation. And if you just highlight the keyframes, right click, and go to interpolation mode, you can set it to linear. You can also experiment with these other ones. I haven't really tested this out, but you could if you wanted to. I just set it to linear. If you hit the space bar, that's the sort of timing that you're looking at. So inside of Roblox, what you would want to technically do is you would just want to loop through all 16 of these textures to appear like this. That's basically how I went about doing this effect. Now if you want to render this out, you would have to basically go to the Cycles render engine instead of the EV one. You can set it to CPU or GPU. I just put it to GPU for my own personal machine. Just put it to whatever's more powerful on yours. I just like to make sure that indirect and emitter are actually set. I don't actually know if that makes a difference really, but yeah, just make sure that you also add in a image texture, because that is what's going to basically allow you to effectively export this out. So if you click on new, now this is something that may or may not impact your level. So if you're finding that the images are like flickering or having issues, you could try and lower this here. So you could try and create an image that isn't 1024 by 1024. You could go with a lower resolution image like 512 or 256 by 256. Just know that when you do that, it may lose some quality, but it may load better for you. So just be aware of that. So if you hit new image, that's basically going to be our node. And if you highlight the node and highlight the actual object itself, so let's say we do this frame here, like frame 13 or 14 or something, and obviously you can edit and mess with the value here, so you can make it fast or as slow as you like. Click on this and click on bake. That's basically going to bake out this particular frame of this texture, and the idea here is you want to bake out all of them. So you want to bake out all from 0 all the way to 16, or however many frames you want to set. It's really up to you. It's really up to your own personal preference. It's just the more images you do with this Mesh VFX approach, the heavier it becomes inside of Roblox. You just need to be very careful about what you're doing. And when you're doing this, you can also just click on this menu, go to image and save as, and you can save this as frame, I think it was 13 we had there, so yeah, frame 13. And you would just go through each frame and just export them out. Now, you can use the script that I provided in my other videos in order to do that. So if I just quickly open up another Blender file, I'll show you what I mean. So in my other guides, I have this script here. So you can use the same approach. So if you were to take this, copy it, and then you were to go to the scripting page, press new, paste it in. What you would need to do here is you would need to create a folder on your desktop, name it to something else, like say for instance sword or something like that, sword test or something. And in the image node name, you'd have to take this, copy it, go back into your shading tab, and inside of this node here, you would have to basically change the name of the node to match the bake target name that's inside of the script. And effectively, if you just click on this run button here, what that will do is it will actually bake out all of your images up to the maximum of whatever you've set on your timeline. So I've set the script up so that it goes from the 0 frame all the way to whatever frame you set here. So just be very careful that you've set the correct amount of frames for your animation. And this should, in bulk, export all 16 frames to your folder. Now, after you do that, what you want to do is you want to come into Roblox, and it's the exact same setup that I've had in the past. So this is just a part with a special mesh component, and effectively what you would have to do is you would just export this sword. You don't have to do any fancy flipped normals or anything like that with this particular mesh effect. The other mesh tutorials you did have to do that because you're working with transparency, but for this one you just need the one mesh, which is nice. So just export the sword. So to do that, you would basically highlight your sword, go to File, Export, FBX, and that's all you have to do there. So you just name it something. Inside of Roblox, you would basically go to View, Asset Manager, and you would just click this little import button, the bulk import, and you would import your sword and all of the textures that you need. And once you do that, create a speed number value. That's just because of my own personal script. You don't actually have to use this. You would just have to get rid of this value here and change the way this basically loads in. So yeah, this is the script here. So effectively what we're doing here is we've got a decal set up to store all of our images, and we're looping through this list of images, and I've set it up so that it's got a frame rate. So if you change these values here, you can get a different type of frame rate. And I've also looked into content provider service inside of Roblox, so that should help when it comes to preloading the textures. So all I'm really doing here is I'm just looping through the table of IDs, and we're just basically preloading all of them into basically the client side. So we're loading them into memory. And then once they're all loaded, I wait for about 5 seconds and then we start doing the animation. Now the reason I'm waiting 5 seconds is because when the game plays it's a little laggy, but in your own script you could take this wait out and you can obviously change this to suit your game or your needs, so you could run this on the client. For the moment I've just disabled this script because on my own client-sided script I do have, just quickly go to start a player, I do have this set up here. So effectively what we're doing here is it's the same exact setup. I've got the frame rate. I'm basically looping through the IDs. We're preloading them. And once the preload service is done, we are effectively going to be just looping through the IDs once. Because technically speaking, you don't have to have this loop over and over and over again like your other mesh effects. You just have to preload the images and play them once. And because obviously I've got multiple swords appearing when you press the R key, we remote into the server, which should be, it's this script here. Yeah, it's this script here. So I'm basically using a for loop to create 3 different swords. I'm using an increment to basically place them in unison with my player. We're firing back to the client and we're basically trying to set up some sort of particle emitter at the moment. So we're not actually doing anything in terms of damage or shooting off the swords or what have you, but this is just a sort of template to get you started. So if I press the R key, see that the swords sort of spawn. Now it's not the best looking because I am recording, so it's going to not look as good. It looks okay when I'm not recording, and when you're playing in your own level, and when you publish the game level and you're playing in a live game session, this loads perfectly fine. So it should load like that, and we're just looping through the actual sword itself. And for my own personal take on this, when the decals reach the very end of the ID here, I actually set the sword transparency for the decal to invisible, and I bring back the normal sword decal, and that way I can use the highlighter as well. So yeah, it's just for basically what I'm doing here is I'm basically setting the transparency to 1, bringing back the main sword's transparency, just so that you get the nice highlighted outline. That's all I'm really doing for this type of effect. Now you guys can obviously take this further. You can do it for any number of effects. It's just good for like anything that dissolves or needs to appear or what have you. You can do it with like any model you want really. So yeah, I'm hoping this covers it. This is going to be probably the last video for the mesh VFX unless I come up with another type of effect that you guys want to see. I'm probably going to be moving on to different types of effects. I may incorporate the mesh VFX into future videos as an additional step, but I just wanted to sort of highlight that you can achieve a lot of the same stuff that you can inside of like Unity or Unreal Engine inside of Roblox, but you have to do it in a different way. It's sort of a crude, sort of just raw flipbook sort of way, because Roblox obviously doesn't have their own shader system. But yeah, be on the lookout for more videos. I'm trying to be more active. I'm sorry if my mic is a little bit kind of fuzzy or funky, or if I'm saying and quite a lot. I'm trying to work on it. I just did it there, but yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll try my best to come up with some more clever ideas and effects. If you want to join my Discord, the link will be in the description below. We're trying to get an active community together, so if you've got any ideas, any video suggestions, just ping me a message and I'll try and help out. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Bye.